Yes. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Julie Niederhauser, and I work at the Alaska State Library. And oops, we're admitting some people here.
I can do that, Julia, while you are introducing.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we'll let Claire go ahead and admit people. So I'm going to stop my video. Sharing request transcriptions be available. Yes, we can do that. Okay. All right. Well, hello and welcome to the Public Librarian Chat, updating your collection development policy. Today, during today's chat, Claire and I will share reasons why it's essential that your library has an up-to-date collection development policy, and we will review common collection development elements and highlight some resources that you may find helpful. So one of your library's primary roles is to provide users with access to information and resources. And your collection development policy is your blueprint for building and maintaining the library's collection. It is the framework that guides the activities involved in the collection development process. I really like this quote that I'm going to share with you. I think it's really pertinent. It says, so in her book, Fundamentals of Collection Development and Management, Peggy Johnson states, libraries without collection development policies are like businesses without business plans. So Claire and I are going to co-present during this webinar, and both will be watching the chat. So as you guys enter questions, if we don't respond to your questions right away, please know that at the end we're going to have some time and we're going to go back and make sure that we answer as many questions as we can. So I'm going to go ahead and let Claire, she wanted to talk a little bit about the why we're offering this webinar, and Claire, I will manage the people coming in.
Okay, great. So I'm the grants administrator at the Alaska State Library, and probably most of you have heard about this requirement from me. We are requiring an update of your collection development policy this year as part of the Public Library Assistance Grants. And really, I think the driving force behind this is patience is hearing from a lot of other libraries that they're dealing with collection development challenges, and just she wants Alaska libraries to be prepared to handle challenges or reconsideration requests if they come up, and to look at your collection development policy. The last time I think that we did a big call for an updated collection development policy was in 2000 or 2002. So it really has been a long time, and hopefully most of you have updated them since the last time we asked for them. But if not, it's a good time to think about how library collections and library audiences and users have changed, and how your collection development policy can help support what you're doing at your library.
All right. Excellent. All right, let's move on to the next slide here. So the collection development process, it's circular, it's continuous, and your collection development policy really should help guide your process. So the process begins hopefully with a good understanding of your community. So who does your library serve, and what exactly are their needs? Then moves on to selection, acquisition, cataloging, and classification, circulation, evaluation, and deselection, which is also known as weeding. And then it repeats. So each of the elements in the collection development process require decision making, and your collection development policy provides you and your staff with guidance in how decisions relating to selecting, acquiring, evaluating, and maintaining your collection will be made. So you'll note that in this little, on the slide, I've placed the director, the board, and the staff inside the collection development process. And in the chat, take a moment and just let share why you think they are central to this process. And I want you to know that I can I see the chat? Yes, I can see the chat. So go ahead and take a moment and share why you believe the board, the library director, and the staff are central to the collection development process. Okay, so Kathy says they have the most direct interactions with the patrons. Yes. Yes, the staff and the board are the ones that hear from the public what they want. Exactly. Very good. Yeah. The board is responsible for policy changes. That's correct. Yes. Right. The staff is familiar with what the new materials that's coming in. Oh, I love this. Yeah, it needs to be a conversation among the staff and the board and give everyone confidence that the collection's being developed the way people want it to do. Yeah, not every library has a board. That's a really good point, Catherine. Thank you for sharing that. Excellent. Right. So you guys have done an excellent job. So we're not going to well, I could say there's again, if there's a challenge or a reconsideration, the director is going to refer back to that policy to see what is the process. When staff are asked are given gifts and donations that they maybe don't want, they can refer back to the policy and say thank you, but no thank you. It doesn't fit within the scope of our collection. Hopefully the board and the director are involved in the process of developing the policy, and that involves understanding the community. Okay, we're going to go on to the next slide. So there's lots of benefits to having a collection development policy. I'm not going to lie that creating one is really easy. It's a snap. It isn't. It is a process. It should be involving more than just the director. It should involve the staff and the board for sure in developing that policy. But once you have that policy, it really will provide some benefits. So we've listed some common ones here on the slide. I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think are some additional benefits to having a collection development policy? And if you want to go ahead and add that into the chat, that would be great. That's correct, Barbara. Really helps with selection, that's for sure. Oh, thank you for doing that, Claire. Yes. Yeah. Right, and I'm sure everyone's had experience of a patron coming up and wanting to know why one book is in the collection and another isn't. So that's a great point, Marguerite. Oops. To watch my finger on the mouse here.
Catherine mentioned it can be an education tool or a training resource for new staff. I think that's a really good one that I would have liked when I was a new staff in charge of collecting.
Yeah, so lots of really good comments and coming in the chat. Helps with weeding and defending the choices. And sometimes you have to defend it from your own staff, right? Sometimes it's the staff that won't let anything go. It's not always the patrons. Okay, some additional things. It reduces the influence of a single selector because it has that selection criteria. So it kind of minimizes personal bias, the effect personal bias can have on a collection. Again, lots of people have mentioned it sets standards for inclusion and exclusion. Forces staff to think about the organizational goals of the library, and helps with weeding and evaluating. You guys mentioned that. And informs everyone, not just the staff, but also the community, of what the collection priorities are. And these additional benefits, they came from developing library and information center collections by G. Edward Evans and Margaret Zarnowski Saporano. I think that's how you say her name. Okay, moving on to the next slide here. Oh, I'm going the wrong direction. Okay. I have to move my chat because I can't see the image here. So hopefully everybody can see. I've included an image of protecting intellectual freedom in your public library, scenarios from the front lines, which was written by Alaskan librarian June Pennell Stevens. Oh, I don't know if you guys ever had a chance to meet June. When I first started working in libraries in Alaska, she was a force to be reckoned with. June. She was very involved in ACLA and very involved in ALA and the Intellectual Freedom Committee. Anyway, so she wrote this really fantastic book. If you go to the Alaska Library catalog or the statewide catalog, you can see lots of libraries have it in their collection. And so when we were putting this webinar together, we wanted to talk about what's important to include. We went to June's book and we listed her, what she considered the essential collection development policy elements. And you'll note that community description is bold and there's some little asterisks. She did not include that as an essential element. But I think it is an important one. And so I've included it. But anyway, in the article, Notes on Operations, Nimble Collection Development Policies, and Achievable Goal, Helen N. Levinson states that the steps to creating collection development policy cannot be uniformly applied since each library is unique. Each institution can develop a specific valuable processes to best fit their needs to produce an effective collection development plan. So this article that I'm referring to recently came out, and the focus was on like mid-sized academic libraries. But here's the thing, the article was so good about just generally the importance of having a collection development policy. So I would encourage you to read it. And she does talk about the benefits to public libraries as well. So as I mentioned in her book, Protecting Intellectual Freedom in Your Public Library, Scenarios from the Front Line, June Pennell Stevens included a list of elements that she believes are essential to include in a collection development policy. And so for the rest of the webinar, Claire and I are going to review each of these elements, and by examining how they are actually incorporated in Alaska collection development policies. We'll also review community description, an element June Pennell Stevens didn't include in her list. So I'm going to go on to the next one here. So the first element that she includes is an introduction, which makes a lot of sense. So if you're going to have a policy, you probably should talk about why you have this policy and talk about what it covers and mention how frequently it's going to be reviewed. So for an example, we went to Homer Public Libraries, and their policy begins with the purpose of the policy. And it states right from the beginning who prepared the policy, who it was prepared by, who approved it, and who adopted it. And then it mentions the purpose. And I love the fact that the purpose is twofold. The purpose is to guide the library staff in the selection of materials and to inform the public about the principles in which the library's collection is developed and maintained. And then you'll see it lists this policy will be reviewed every 3 years. So this is community description. It was the element that June Pennell Stevens didn't consider essential. But we think it kind of, I personally think it is. So In that book, on page 54 of the book, Developing Library and Information Center Collections, G. Edward Evans and Margaret Zarnowski Sapornero describe what a community description element should include. So basically, who is the what is the service community that's going to be served, composition of the community, what changes are occurring, and things like that. So again, we're going to go back to Homer. So they do include a community description, and it really, the policy situates where Homer is geographically, right? It's 233 road miles south of Anchorage. And it talks about the service population area contains several different communities, right? It isn't just the city of Homer. So you get an idea that it's very much a rural library and a big area community that they are serving. And then it goes on to talk about the population. So there's a population estimate, some demographics, so the makeup of who's in that population. And also they include the predominant language and then some other, another language that's predominantly speaking in 4 communities. So we have English is the predominant language in the Homer area with the exception of 4 predominantly Russian speaking villages. So thinking about just that bit of information about the language, why would you want to consider that in your collection development policy? Why would you want to consider your service, the broader areas that you're serving? You can go ahead and enter if you have any thing you want to share in the chat. Right. So you want to make sure that you have material in your language, in the language that you service. Yeah, exactly. Very good. Okay. And then one thing that I thought was really interesting was in the Homer policy is that they listed the other libraries and other types of libraries in their service area. So they kind of put themselves in this information ecosystem. So they mentioned that there's 3 other municipal public libraries located nearby. There's 2 small public libraries. The Pratt Museum operates a non-lending library. There's 2 academic libraries. So you really get an idea that they are part of a larger system. Okay. All right, so the next element is collection purpose or mission. And really, this is kind of where the collection development policy is connected to the library's mission statement, right? So let's look at 2 examples of that. So we're going to go with Homer. You guys, there's a lot of Homer stuff, but there's other libraries too. I want to let you know. Okay, so they state in their CD policy that the mission statement of the library guides this collection development policy. And then they list their mission statement, and you can see that it states that the mission of the Homer Public Library is to serve the diverse needs of our community members, right? And talks about how they're going to do that. In the Soldotna Public Library, and kind of their purpose area of their CD policy, they state that the mission of the Joyce K. Carver Memorial Library, Public Library, they talk about what it is. And then down below that, they say to support this mission, library materials are selected and organized to provide maximum accessibility in order to anticipate and meet the complex needs of our users to encourage non-users. I think there's supposed to be an S there, to use our services. So it's a little bit different. So one library talks about how their mission statement guided their CD policy, and another library talked about how the way that the materials and things are selected supports their mission. So there isn't just one way to do it. It's really, you need to develop a policy that meets your unique needs. Okay, I'm going to pass the baton to Claire here.
Thanks, Julie. So yeah, I think Julie has mentioned that there are these essential elements, but really what we're looking for from your submissions with your PLA grants is a policy that works for you. So different communities are going to have different needs, and so it makes sense that different policies are going to include different elements. But one of them that I think all of the policies should include is a recognition of your user needs, what they're looking for from the collection, how you're determining what user needs are, and how users can request materials that they specifically want, and how those requests are considered. Okay, so next slide is a sample from Fairbanks or Starborough's user needs statement. So it looks at, again, how users can request items and then how those requests are dealt with. Okay. The other thing, and specifically is really relevant to this request right now, is intellectual freedom. Collections development policies should reflect how your library approaches intellectual freedom, you know, which policies your library is following, and then establishing some procedures for intellectual freedom challenges. I think it also, this section can, if it's done well, can take some of the pressure off of library staff, because it puts the burden of making choices for yourself and your family onto the user. So intellectual freedom says we collect things from different perspectives, and you as a user can make determinations about if you're going to consume those materials or not. So I think those are important things to see in a collection development policy. So next, let's take a look at Homer, again, their intellectual freedom statement. So they established that they are not promoting particular points of view. They point readers of this policy to various documents that are kind of foundational to libraries. And then on the next page, they go into accessing those materials and, again, putting that responsibility onto users for selecting their materials and the materials of their children, which is continued on the next slide. And I think also on the following one. So as far as challenges, I think most of the challenges that we hear about are for children's materials. So I think there is a good reason to emphasize that specifically intellectual freedom for children and for young adults. So that may be why there's so much about children's materials in this section. So specifically with challenges, that's one of the things that we are looking for in your updated policies. We want to help you be prepared for a challenge. I mean, hopefully you won't have that at your library, but if you do some planning in advance and think through how you're going to handle that and make others aware of the procedure for handling a challenge, it will make the process a lot easier. And I've gotten permission from a couple of libraries to share some parts of their challenge or reconsideration document. So I'm going to share it in the chat. First up, we have Wrangle's reconsideration policy, which I've just sent as a PDF. And, when you just look at this one, it kind of seems like it hasn't been updated in a while, just based on the font, but reviewing it, it seems there are some elements that I think are really good with regards to the reconsideration process. It's quite detailed. It establishes who is going to make that decision and how long they have to do that, which is important. It kind of just sets a reasonable timeline for that challenge. It also states that when library staff or whoever is on the committee are reviewing those materials, they're going to read or consume the whole thing. So they're going to take the whole work into consideration, not just certain parts or pages or sections. It explains who is going to communicate that decision to the person who requests the reconsideration. And it also says after this reconsideration, there's not going to be anything further. Like, this is the process we're going through. And once that has happened, then that's it. I think I have seen some policies that have an appeals process, but you don't want it to end up that the appeals process is going on and on. Like, at some point, the decision is made, and that is the decision that will stand. I will note that Wrangle does not have a library board or require city council approval. So that's something that is not in this document, but it may be in a requirement for your library. And so if that is the case, then it should be included in your reconsideration process. So the next document that I want to share is the reconsideration form, which is from Haynes. And I think this one is pretty similar to examples that I've seen from ALA. But there are just a couple of things that I want to highlight. And I think this form, if the person requesting the challenge, is thoughtful about filling it out, it really kind of requires them to reflect on that book or work and think about what's reasonable as far as what the library is going to do, and maybe do a little bit of outside research about that item. So in that way, a reconsideration form could possibly help kind of bring the temperature of the interaction down if the challenger is responsible in completing this form. So I hope those examples are helpful to you in thinking about this section. This is one of the sections that I'm specifically looking for when you submit your policies. If you don't have anything in your policy about how to handle a reconsideration or a challenge, then I'm going to get back to you and say, please add this section before I can send out your money. So now I'll hand it back to Julie.
Okay, so do we want to take a minute, and are there any questions about the anything we've covered so far? Any of those elements that we talked about earlier, the introduction, the community description, the purpose, the intellectual freedom piece? Am I missing one? Missing the list here. The user needs. You know, the examples that we did share earlier, those ALA guiding documents I believe are really helpful also in the reconsideration when you have to argue why you may have included something in your collection, because they support the idea that your library is providing content to meet a diverse community needs. Okay. And at the end of this slide, we have links to all of those guiding documents. And we can send this out to you, the PowerPoint. If anyone wants it, we can share it with you as well. Okay, so now we're on to selection. And basically, it just states, so who has the ultimate authority to make these decisions about what goes into your collection, and where, you know, what review sources are you consulting? Again, talks about intellectual freedom principles that apply to selection. Oftentimes, it defines the criteria for selecting materials. I have seen collection development policies that state that, and I can't remember what they're called now, but a certain type of book format, or a certain type, some formats they will not select. Maybe those really gigantic coffee table type books. Maybe your library says, I don't have the space for that, I'm not going to collect it, and so on. Okay, so let's go on to the next one and show you some examples. So this is from Anchorage, the Anchorage Public Library, and it states very emphatically, the ultimate authority for material selection rests with the library director, right? But then it also refers to, there's a manager of collection development, a manager of collection management. And so it's not, you know, there are other people who will be involved in this process. I've seen collection development policies that state that the children's librarian will be responsible for collecting materials for that children's collection. So they might say the library director has the ultimate authority, but also this person will work on this particular collection. Okay. So here we go, in Anchorage example, a team of librarians under the direction of the manager of collection management will assist with collection management, and they will use their professional judgment and expertise, right, based on understanding of user needs and knowledge of authors and publishers or producers. Turn it up here. And this is one of the sentences that I've seen recommended that be included in your CD policy. There is no single standard which can be applied to all acquisition decisions. Okay, so it's going to depend. Some materials are judged on artistic merit, scholarship values. Materials are judged on overall effect rather than specific illustration, words, passages, or scenes considered to be offensive. That goes back to what the example that Claire just shared, that when people are reviewing items that have been challenged, that they are going to be required to watch the whole video, read the whole book, not just pull out a part, a page, illustration, right? They need to look at the whole item. Anchorage is continued, and it talks about where they're going to find their reviews. You know, it talks about commercial reviews, listservs, websites, professional reviews, book lists, bibliographies. And then I didn't include this on the slide, but then they included 3 areas of criteria. Let's see. So there's, it says here, all acquisitions are evaluated using standard library review source and against the criteria listed below. And those 3 categories of criteria are, there's general criteria for the evaluation of library materials, and it listed all the things they're going to look at under that category. And then there's specific criteria for the evaluation of works of information and opinion. Again, they're going to list all the things they're going to look for specifically under that category. And then the final one is specific criteria for the evaluation of works of imagination. And this just speaks that, again, they're not going to use one set of criteria to evaluate all types of resources, but they're going to use specific criteria for specific types of resources. Then back to our Homer example, says selection of materials is based on professional judgment of the library staff. Again, and they refer back to, which is guided by the needs of the community and the balance and comprehensiveness of the collection. And then selection is aided by reviews and other professional tools, such as standard catalogs and bibliographies. And then they go on and list some examples of where they're getting their, looking at these reviews. So we have reviews in professional library journals, internet resources for evaluation and selection, and individual subject expertise of staff, and then publisher catalogs and standard bibliographies. So I'm just curious, are there some other review sources?
Hello.
What type of reviews do you use? Where do you look to for reviews of certain types of, or what to include in your collection? If you want to share those in the chat. We have listed catalog, book list. Yep. One that came to mind, I was thinking of Alaska University Press or Alaskana Resources. New York Times book reviews, New York Times. The listserv, yeah. Are people sharing the new local, maybe in local books? Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. All right, and then they talk, so here's the selection criteria for Homer, and they go ahead and list what it is. So it, I can't see because of the slide, but it says selection criteria considered in the evaluation and re-evaluation. So I love the fact that they included that in there, because once you add something to your collection, it's not one and done. You don't just add things and never look at them again. You're going to look at that item again over time and say, is it still important to keep this in the collection? Is it being used? Is it still fall within our scope of our collection? Is it still relevant? Is the information still pertinent? So yeah, it's evaluation and re-evaluation, and they list all of the things. So I'm not going to read them to you, but I am going to say that, in addition to price, which is a very important one, they've included library space. And I'm just curious, why do you think library space is one of the selection criteria in the Homer Public Library's collection development policy? Why would space be a consideration? Exactly, Catherine, very good. Yeah, it's finite. Yeah. So if somebody wants to donate to you some book series that's 30 titles in the series, you may not want to accept that, right? Yeah, it makes total sense to me. And no, we have limited space. Absolutely, that space is vital. It is important. Okay. So then the next element we have is collection management. And this kind of gets into the details. Again, your collection development policy, it's not a procedure manual. It's not going to tell you exactly how to do something, but it's giving you those guiding principles of when you have to make a decision. So it just talks about the specific responsibilities and activities, talks about discarding, donations, how you're going to handle donations and duplicate titles. Are you going to have duplicate titles in your collection? And if so, what types of titles are you going to buy more than one copy of? And then there's some other, some cover problems as they arise. So here I just included how the discarding, how Anchorage Public Library handles discarding. It says it's the collections regularly reviewed, materials deemed no longer of value are removed from the collections. And then it talks about the things that come into play when they decide whether or not to keep something. So the physical condition, how frequently is it used, number of copies, and so on and so on, okay? But it doesn't go into the nitty-gritty details of how they're going to discard something. And then we have collection descriptions. So again, this is an optional. June Pennell Stevens thought this element was optional. You could have it, you may want to have it, you don't have to have it. But a lot of library collection development policies do kind of identify some specific collection, some specific areas that they are going to collect. I bet you can guess what's one one. I know it's right here. Okay, I was going to say. So identify specific parts of the collection in more depth. Example, local history. So almost all of the collections that I've seen include some kind of reference to Alaskana or local history. So let's look at one here. Again, we've got Homer. So this is going to be about materials about Alaska and neighboring regions. Collection priorities of the Alaskana collection include as complete coverage as possible of the immediate Homer area, broad coverage of South Central, and selected coverage of the rest. So I like the way that they kind of defined how much coverage of each of these areas that they're going to do. So they're not going to try to get every book about the North Slope or about Southwestern Alaska, I mean, or whatever. They're going to focus really about as much as possible about Homer and South Central, and then have selected coverage for the rest of the state. And then the other types of collection descriptions that you see are for formats. And so you'll see that they have included this one about electronic books and audiobooks and music and magazines. This is their downloadable content. And I was just curious, you notice that they list each of these separately. Do you think it's important to do that in a collection development policy? And this is just a question. Do you think, could they have just said downloadable content and not specified audiobooks, ebooks, or music? Or do you think it's important to specify exactly what type of downloadable content they're talking about? And go ahead and there's no right or wrong answer here. I'm just curious because I think there's more than one way to do that.
So while you're thinking about that, the other thing about digital content, it wouldn't necessarily go in this collection description section, but you might in your collection development policy want to think about how you collect digital and print. Like, do you collect the same title in both formats, or would you give priority to something that you could only get in one format? Kind of how does that duplication work for your library with regards to electronic materials?
Okay, we do have somebody say that in our current policy, we even list McNaughton. So they even talk about it, that's leasing, that they are participate in that McNaughton leasing option. Lots of libraries do that. Oftentimes they do it for large print books, which are really expensive, and they can have them in the collection for a while and then change them out pretty cost effectively. So yeah, it does make sense sometimes to definitely identify specific formats. We're going to go to the next one here. So I did want to highlight, you notice that I have the Alaska Digital Libraries included in here. And so they did, in the Homer policy, they did talk about that they get this downloadable content from Listen Alaska, from their Alaska Digital Library. So if you participate in kind of a cooperative or consortial type agreement for electronic resources, you may definitely want to include that in your policy as well. So one of the things that's really taken off, I think it was happening before the pandemic, but certainly after the pandemic, is the on-demand streaming services. And lots of libraries made the decision to purchase licenses in these areas. So if you did do that, you may want to include that in your collection development policy and kind of specify what those streaming services, what needs are they going to be meeting for your community. And then I have this in learning. It used to be lynda.com. So, you know, if you're doing any kind of databases, any of the databases as well, which I don't know how actually what to call lynda.com. I guess it fits definitely under on-demand streaming, but some of these things kind of straddle more than one type of format, I guess. So we do have the database examples here. And so Homer includes the databases for Alaskans, or the SLED databases. And then they mention that they may subscribe to other specific databases of interest, usefulness to their community. Okay, so the final element in June Pennell Stevens' list is the appendices. And this is where you would actually include your reconsideration form. If you solicit comments from users, you might have a user suggestion form you might want to add to there. You might want to definitely include links to some of those ALA guiding principles, such as the freedom to read, freedom to view, Library Bill of Rights, whichever ones that you think are really important to include in your CD policy. This is where you would include those as well.
Julie, I just want to surface a couple of things that came out in the chat. And one is that there are some consortial resources that you maybe will want to highlight in your collection development policy, like with Alaska's Digital Library. You know, there is some consortial collection development that's happening, and so it's not happening at the local level. And the other one is being part of the Alaska Library Catalog. It may come into your consideration for materials if you're part of the Alaska Library Catalog, like how many other locations, how many other libraries have this item already? Is there wide consortial access to a book or a work that means we don't need to provide it in our local collection? So those were great comments. Thank you.
They're good, and it's kind of going to be, I believe, will be an evolution as that catalog expands, and as people decide, maybe some libraries will focus more in one area and others in others, so that everyone isn't duplicating the same titles in the collection. I think that's probably already happening now, because people are referring, as we said, to the catalog to see how many other libraries are holding an item and whether they need to make that decision or not to purchase it. So good. Okay, we wanted to go. So just so you know, give credit where credit is due. We have some resources. We've included resources, the books and the articles that we referred to when we were developing this webinar. It's here. Again, we have June Pennell Stevens, that Nimble Collection Development Policies. It's really a good read. It's really well done. I encourage anyone to read that. resource, the guiding documents from ALA. So we have included them all here. So you can have access to those. There's quite a few of them. And then we have the resources, the Alaska CD policy. All of the ones that I shared were freely available online. I think that's an excellent practice and goes back to the two purposes of the CD policy that were highlighted in that homers, is that this policy is to help guide the staff in the decisions that they make in selecting materials. But there's a broader purpose, and that is to inform the community of what the focus is of your collection and how it's being developed, because really it's their collection, right? And you need to communicate how those decisions are being made. I really think it's important that we talk about our expertise as librarians in the CD policy, that we talk about where we get how we will review items, where those sources come from, and having it in a policy that you can refer to, having that reconsideration process, and outlined how you will solicit suggestions from the community for the books that they want, and how you will defend choices that you've made because you've followed your process. So I think it's really good to have those CD policies public, to attach them to your website, your library's website, your city's website, and let people know how you went about the process of creating it. And hopefully it's going to be updated soon. So again, thanks to Claire. It's been great working with you on this project. Thanks to everybody for coming. And now I think we have some time. I'm going to look at my time here. We've got a few minutes. Are there any questions? You can unmute yourself, and if you have the ability to ask a question, go ahead and ask it, or you can ask it in the chat. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording here.
I just want to thank the Irene Engel Public Library and Haynes for giving me permission to share some of their documents. They are not, as far as I can tell, available online right now, but they said it was fine to use them as examples for all of you. So I appreciate that.
Okay.